Go.
So here we are back in the Q&A session for the first week of John's Fundamentals of Digital Photography class. We've been spending today talking about the photographer's eye, a brief overview about what we're going to cover in this class. And we've got some questions. First, let me start with some comments from the chat room. Everybody was really enjoying a lot of your photographs. And just to clarify for everybody out there, do you do all your own photography and do all your own stunts?
Yes. As you follow this class along, I will let you in on some of my goofy, wacky adventures that you may have seen seen some pictures of. It's something that I've combined with photography. As I say, I combine photography with just about everything I do, and so I love traveling and adventurous travel. And so, yeah, I've been to some crazy corners of the world, and I do my own photography. And I do very little Photoshop work. I do a little bit to clean up here and there. I use Lightroom more than anything else. But, what you see is straight what you're getting. Except for that shot of the Earth and the stars, I didn't do that one.
Oh, come on. You didn't get up in the satellite?
I jumped really high.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about floating a camera. There's been some people who've been floating the cameras up into space. Yes.
And getting curvature of the Earth.
I think that would be fun to do.
I've seen some of that.
I might need some technical help. So if anyone wants to do that with me, just get in touch.
Ooh.
That would be fun.
So, John, do you shoot Nikon or Canon, and why?
Ooh, I better have full disclosure here, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so when I was a kid, I had a Minolta camera, and then
Polaroid.
It was a 110.
Okay.
But it was nice because it had a flash unit on it. I've had a Pentax camera. I've had an Olympus camera. I used Nikon for many, many years and loved it and think they make fantastic cameras. When I started working for Art Wolf, he shot with Canon and I shot with Nikon. He was slightly more famous than me. Woo! And we had to use pool equipment when we were out in the field. And so it was kind of like, well, John, would you be willing to switch from Canon to Nikon and travel to the far reaches of the planet to photograph the most amazing wildlife and scenics? Okay, I'll switch from Canon to Nikon to Canon. And so I've been shooting Canon for the last several years. Canon makes some wonderful stuff. I like Canon. I like Nikon. I tell you what I hate. I hate switching. I hate switching from one system to the next. And I'm pretty fluent in both because I have a background in retail. And so in my classes that I teach in person where people have their cameras there, I'll help people with their Canons and Nikons. And I'm about as fluent as you get in both languages.
All right. So talking about hardware, we have some very specific questions, which I know we don't want to get into today, right? But a question like someone from the chat room asked, how do you reduce blur fringe on a 50 millimeter 1.4? So rather than answer that specific question, can you just talk about how you're going to go through in this class and talk about maybe some of the questions people should bring to each individual one? So I'll start out with an example, right? Tomorrow, the camera. So we're going to talk about the camera.
Next week, the camera.
Sorry, not tomorrow. Next week is the camera. So somebody could bring questions like, do I have to buy an SLR?
Yes.
What point and shoot should I buy? Are we going to cover some general rules of thumb?
One of the things that I think I'm going to cover that's the most important fact about next week's The Camera class is if you think about the history of photography and the world of photography, there are hundreds of different formats. There are thousands of different styles of camera that have come about over the years. And for some reason, the SLR camera has become the favorite of the serious photographer. Now, I know there's serious photographers who use rangefinders and view cameras and other things, but for the majority of the serious photographers, they use an SLR. Why is that? There must be something that has going for it, because there's all these different systems, and many of the systems address different issues in photography. But for the majority of people, the SLR has, for a variety of reasons that I will explain next week, is really the best system out there. Now, once again, it's not a statement that covers everyone under every situation. So for some of you, maybe the best camera is a simple point and shoot. For other people, maybe it's a $50,000 view camera with a scanning back. But we'll go into the SLR, how it works, why it's so good, why I think it's so valuable of a tool, and why I enjoy using that type of tool. It is a tool, and that's all this fun equipment that I love to play with. There are different tools for getting the job done. And whatever gets the job done that you want done in the style and manner of what you want is really the right tool for you.
So actually following along on that, what equipment would you recommend for taking this class?
For taking this class, I would recommend a digital SLR, Canon, Nikon, Pentax, Olympus camera that you can take the lens on and off, that you can adjust your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO, basically a camera that you can handle manually. Because, as I will very clearly show, when you can manually control the camera, your creativity level just expands to huge margins. And this is, kind of what Chase was alluding to. It's this creativity that he's really wanting to blossom. If you are using a point-and-shoot camera on automatic, I liken that to using a microwave oven. It can get the basic fundamental job down, but if you are a great cook, which I am not, you want to use a range where you can cook in different styles rather than just heating it up in a microwave. And so when you talk about really expanding on your creativity level, you need to take manual control. And I can assure you, it's not that hard. People far less educated and ambitious than those of you here in the class and those of you watching online, you've already taken a great first step to say, hey, this is important to me. I'm willing to learn it. And given the modern tools that I've been able to work with for presenting this information, everyone's going to walk out of here knowing a ton of information. And so do not feel daunted by, there is a lot of information. I've spent my whole life in photography. I have a degree in photography. It's basically been consuming my life for the last 20 years. And I've tried to distill it into the easiest understand method that I can find possible. That I have.
Great. Thanks, John. I think we've got a question here in the audience. Go ahead if you want to speak into the mic. Speaking into the mic actually broadcasts your voice over the internet, so people who are watching the live feed can hear it.
Okay, my question is whether we need to bring our camera here for next class when you're talking about camera.
Well, it probably wouldn't hurt if you had your camera here. And so if you want to bring your camera and you want to have a little bit of fumbling around, trying to play with your ISOs and stuff, that's completely all right with me. We will need to keep things fairly quiet, and I won't be able to come up and help you find your ISO button on your camera. But by all means, you can bring your camera in. And, when we're done live and you want to come up and what's this button here? I've never been able to figure this one out. I'm totally cool with that, and we can do that.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll even have one of these cameras, Craig, hooked up live, and you can show me they'll show me showing her where the button is, and so that might be kind of fun. We'll have one day we'll bring your camera to class, and what's this funny button?
We are definitely working out how to get you the more hands-on equipment so you can show people stuff off right at your desk.
Very good.
Very
nice.
Cool.
So, John, with some of your animations and some of the slideshows that you show us, there's some really great visual representation. So I want to go back to the one where you talked about the human eye, how the lens is curved and then the retina is curved. So why don't they make a curved camera sensor? Has anybody
I would
tried
like
that?
to see that. Well, there are cameras that have circular film planes. So far, nobody's been able to do that digitally.
Okay.
And I think digitally it'd be very tough making a curved wafer. But if they could, there is a potential for fixing that whole problem and seeing the world in a completely new way. If you think that you've lived through a revolution of photography, live another 25 years, because I think we are going to continue to see amazing changes. We saw a huge change from manual focus to autofocus, and there was a huge disruption in the photographic community on that. We've had a huge changeover in digital that we've all seen in our lives. And now with video being integrated, that is going to become more and more, just like Chase said, integrated into still photography. And video and still are interesting beasts that work together, and they're different. And understanding that difference, I think, is a key element. One of the things that I heard a long time ago from photojournalism school is that the still photographer had an easier time transitioning to video than video did to still. The still photographer, in essence, was a little bit more discerning about composition because they just had to get one thing right. Video was so concerned about all these other things. And so when you go from the still word to video, you often go in with a very good compositional eye. And so mastering still photography, maybe with an eye going to video in the future, is a good route to go.
And talking about some of the hardware that people might want to gather or think about for the class, are there any lenses or filters that you would recommend people get their hands on, something that you're going to talk about maybe during composition or gadget bag that they may want to have in advance to practice with?
You know, it's really hard to recommend gear for everyone, but I don't like to dodge questions. So, you know, real basically, where you want to be if you want to get into photography is you want to have a camera that you can change the lens on. You want to have a lens that goes down to about 28 millimeters wide. And if you don't know what that means, well, stay tuned in.
Yeah, that's right.
You want to get so you want something that has decent wide angle, about a 28. You're probably going to want something that goes up to 200. And I realize that you can get that in a little point-and-shoot camera. But as I say, I'll explain why having this in an SLR camera really makes life a lot better. You're probably going to want a polarizer. And that's the basics to get started. Right now, you can purchase a kit like that for under $1,000 US funds. It's not super, super cheap. I know we have some college students and people who are on fairly tight budgets, and I'll be the first to admit that photography is not the cheapest hobby you can get into. There is a little bit of money. You can spend a tremendous amount of money if you have it. And I'll be more than glad to help tell you how to spend $20,000 on gear. But, you know, you're going to need a little bit of investment to do this. But the nice thing about digital is, you know, once you make that initial investment, you can start going out and shooting pictures all day long, and it costs you a few pennies to charge the batteries and download the images.
Great. And what about UV filters? Some people have asked about whether or not they should have those on all their lenses.
UV filters is something that I've dodged in the past, and I address in this show, and I'm going to let that hang out there until that time has come.
All right. So we're going to cover that later on in the class.
And folks, if you see me dodging questions, it's often because I have visuals to back up what I'm going to say. And I love having visuals because I can make my explanation and my argument much, much better rather than just trying to say it here. And as you see in the class, it's a very visually orientated class. And virtually everything, and I have two exceptions, that I have been able to visualize to help show and explain something to you. And I love, that's one of my passions, is really being able to how to show and explain something so that you can walk out of here and in a matter of 10 seconds you go, I never understood it, and now I totally got it.
Awesome.
Well, you also have to tease for future classes. So.
A little bit.
I mean,